Welcome to Pigeon River Farm, doing farming right. I'm Robert Brown, the owner of Pigeon River Farm. Thank you for viewing. Good evening. Tonight we're going to talk about homesteading and the equipment that you're going to need for homesteading. There is a variety of equipment that's needed, and how are you going to acquire this? There's many different ways. One I want to talk specifically about here first is going to be auctions. In our area, in the upper Midwest, specifically to central Wisconsin, there's quite a few auctions year-round that are farm auctions for a variety of different reasons. The farm is going under financial distress, they're retiring, whatever it is. So there's a variety of auctions. We're also unique in this area that we have one of the largest auctions, I think, in the state. It's got to be darn close. It's a 40 acres, 7 miles away from us. It's called Carly Auction. And they actually have 3 auctions a year. One ends up being in April. That's their big auction. I mean, it's got the largest amount of equipment. Second one is going to be mid to late July, and last one is going to be in September. Each one of them is going to have its own unique identity to it. And so I'm going to use a series of examples to talk about how you should strategize. If you have that kind of situation where you have these consignment auctions, that means a person's bringing their equipment in there, they're specifically put it in place to sell it, and the auction company makes a little percentage on it. So in that particular case here, in spring of the year, in April, you got to think about the mindset. Items that you don't want to be buying then from is going to be planting equipment. Any lighter tillage equipment would not be a good purchase. Everybody's going to be bidding on that. The items that you could consider buying are going to be, your hay processing, hay rakes, balers, hay binds, swathers, everything in that area. You do have some sales, but at that point, but most people are still thinking about getting everything planted. Another one is going to be fall tillage equipment. Heavy tillage equipment, if you're going to be in that area, is going to be different than the spring tillage equipment. Now, there's a lot of crossovers, but that's the area that I would go in. But definitely don't want to be bidding on equipment that is going to be utilized in the next couple weeks. The next one is going to be, in our case here, we have a summer auction. The summer auction is kind of that midterm, and that's where you're not going to really want to be buying any, combine for doing oats or wheat. That would be a good example of something you want. Any kind of pasture management. So all your haying equipment, of course, would be in very high demand, even though that's when usually you're trying to buy something because it's broken. So in that case there, that is where you're kind of working in. That's going to be a good or better time to start buying planting equipment. So if you have that situation, that's a good time to buy a drill, a better time to buy a corn planter specifically, because that's out of mind now. So your competition. And then in a fall auction, it's going to be that is the time to buy the drill, the grain drill, the corn planter, but not the time to buy a corn picker. Heavy tillage equipment that would be used for fall plowing and such would be not a very good time at all. So you have to get that figured out, get that range and your plan. Now that would be these dedicated auctions. And I know this one's been going on for, in excess of 50 years, so that's a lot of years. The next one is going to be your regular farm auction for whatever reason. They're going to have an auction. In that case there, it could be any one month of the year. So the same strategies apply, but I found a sweet spot for these auctions, if you're going to get the best deal, but you got to be hardy to do this, is going to be the winter auctions. Once the weather's closed in, and usually them are, very unfortunately, kind of a bottom feeder. You're going to an auction because there's hardship, but you also have very little competition. The amount of competition going to an auction in the winter time, especially under very rough conditions, is quite different than going to an auction in beautiful July. So your ability to buy most anything in the winter is going to be much higher. A few years ago, I bought our big round baler. I saved thousands of dollars on purchasing that because it was extremely cold, a couple feet of snow, and I remember even just getting the four-wheel drive truck hooked up to it and getting the truck and the baler pulled out with a big tractor through a couple feet of snow was quite a task. But I saved thousands of dollars, and then traveling almost 40 miles on salty roads, pulling a baler. So them are kind of some of the sacrifices that you have to make. It did get thoroughly washed after. So the farm auctions, you got to look at what they're actually producing. What has that farm been doing over all these years? So analyze out, and often you're going to have to drive quite a ways, and it's going to be an unknown. When you get there, you don't know how many people are going to be there. It's a little weather can dictate. Farmers, and a little strategy here, if it's cropping season, either planting or harvesting, and anything in between, and the weather is bad, the auctions are going to be filled. If it's a good day in the spring and everybody can get out harvesting or cutting hay in the midsummer, or they can be doing corn harvesting, or I should say planting in the spring, but harvesting in the fall, you're going to have a large, you're not going to have many people at auction. Your competition will be less. It'll just be a different demographics. So kind of thinking about that, but it's also time you need to get your work done so you can see be the challenge. Now, if you're the one that has to auction, you better think that out. You always kind of hope for less than perfect weather. So the plan is to look at what that farm equipment that they're going to advertise, and even get to know some of the auctioneers. That gives you kind of a point of reference, and that takes experience. But do your research, talk to other farmers and see what they have had experience with that particular auctioneer. The one phenomenon I've seen over the years, and I've got caught up in it a couple times myself, paying more than the item is worth. You could have bought it new. Because you get caught up in the heat of the moment. It's that dynamic. You've bought stuff on eBay. It's that emotion that gets you going. Auctioneers are trained, or highly trained, to do that, and they'll spot the individuals in the crowd, and they will work them. Don't be the one that's waving your hand around if you're new to this. That's not going to work in your favor. There's a lot of little nuances. A good example is I normally just do the little nod of my head. I just rub my chin. There's just these little things, just kind of a nod, a little flink with the finger, whatever it might be. And what you end up doing then is you kind of have an advantage because nobody's really seeing what you're doing, who's making the bid. And you got to be aware also, sometimes the person selling the item will be bidding against you. It's a game that's played. The auctioneers are often kind of in cahoots with it. Not that they're bad, it's something that goes on. So be aware of that. Kind of analyze the crowd and determine what you want to pay for that item before you get into the bid. Do your research. If they got a baler that you like there, do some really serious research. You'll know exactly what you're going to be getting. If you just go off of pure emotion, it's not going to work. The next area that I've had very good luck both selling and buying of farm items, both equipment and even supplies, and even some little bit with livestock. Not kind of really playing much in that arena, but there have been a couple occasions, is going to be Craigslist. Craigslist is kind of a mixed bag there. I bought a few computer equipment there, and that was people you deal with a little bit sketchy. Cars, of course, a lot of people know you have to be very careful selling cars on Craigslist and buying them. But in the farming area, and I'm not going to make it a panacea, this is not a guarantee, but the ethics of most farmers are very high. You just don't find the bottom feeders there. And what they represent is usually going to be pretty accurate, and the honesty, and even I would say you have a less of a risk for any kind of personal threat. It's always there. Be cautious, be very cautious. But That is not something that's common. Usually you're going to go to a farm, that's a very viable operation. There's no hinkiness going on. But also you're going to have to make sure that you position yourself really well in your negotiations. The one thing with Craigslist that I like is you can see the item via the pictures. You can pre-negotiate the deal, and you have a good idea of what it is. You can find a little history about it, so you've got some interaction. That's the good news. Bad news is your competition is very high. You have a lot of people that are also out there, and unlike eBay, you really don't know what's going on in the background. So it may be, there may be 10 people looking at it, and the guy tells you I got just a line, and you might be the only one. So it's quite different than when you can kind of see the bid take place. So you got to be a conscious purchaser. But Craigslist has worked for me. I've bought a lot of equipment off in it. I've sold a lot of equipment, and I've not had, I would say a bad experience. You always buy the stuff that is represented, and you use it the first time, and it's got a noisy bearing in it. Well, it's bad if it's an engine, but it's not real bad if it's the situation is, it's a disc or something. You just kind of expect it. The next one, and I would say less utilized for buying equipment, is going to be eBay. eBay works, but I have had no experience of buying any larger equipment off eBay, but I have purchased a lot of accessories, cultivator shovels, tines, things of that nature. That is an excellent place to get a deal, and usually it's kind of a unique deal. Somebody had bought it, didn't utilize it, it was the wrong one, whatever it might be, and you happen to have the right application, and many times you buy for pennies on the dollar. So that's been a good one. And there again, if it's smaller items, the shipping ain't the quandary. But if you're in a center part of the state and somebody in California has got something for sale, oh my gosh, the shipping can cost more than the item. If it's small items, that it can go either UPS or in some cases freight for a fixed rate, not too bad. So them are the areas that I would really look at going, and then what you're going to be buying. The type of equipment that's going to be, if you have a particular brand, be careful with the brand loyalty. I'm kind of partially international. I used it my whole life, but I won't hesitate to own I got an Alice Chalmers tractor. I would not hesitate to own a John Deere, or so on. There are some downsides because when you have one, you get familiar with one particular brand, but also sometimes a good deal can come along, and you got to do that analysis. Speaking of analysis, we just did a very strong farm audit, an audit of all of our equipment. We do one every year, but we actually worked with one of the colleges, and we went through all of the items that we utilize here on the farm with a fine-tooth comb, and we looked at what's utilization, what's the return on investment, how often is it used, why is it used, what kind of return does it make. And that's a real eye-opener. It's something that I guess I should even do more often. One example was our skid steer. It still works. I'm real happy with it. I don't have any problem. But it is a high-value item. I mean, that is utilized. It's used almost every day. So maintenance that I put into it, money I bought it, that paid for itself many, many times over. And if I made a large capital expenditure on a newer skid steer, it would be money well spent. On other areas, like our large horsepower tractor, we just don't do that much with it. I wouldn't need a fancy tractor, about the same horsepower, but I wouldn't need anything unique because it pretty much runs some deep-tooth ripping we've been doing. I did a couple of videos on that. Occasionally pulls a disc if I got to repair a pasture or an update a pasture, and then it runs the baler. So it doesn't get that much use. And so for the value, an older tractor works just fine. But if I was still into we were doing organic vegetables and organic corn and sunflower and so on, there I really was taking a chance with a older, less reliable tractor and utilizing that abruptly. So they were the kind of good examples. Some things we purchase new. Some items are just meant to buy new because they're going to wear out on you. And some items make good sense to buy used. I mean, you can buy a 30-year-old disc and put a few bearings in it, and odds are it's going to treat you very well for decades to come. You go ahead and buy, like some mowers and so on. But all the bearings can be run out, all the knives are dull on it, and that would be a bad example of just something not to buy. You might be better off buying new. We just bought a fence trimmer. It's from a company DR. You probably heard of them. I was kind of hesitant on buying it because they didn't view them quite as an ag company. But I have this fence trimmer, and we just bought it new, and I am so pleased with it. It works extremely well. But that would be a good example because it's a rough and tumble environment utilizing it. I don't know if I'd want to buy one of them used after it's been out there for 10 years. So it was an example of buying something new. So them decisions should be made both on a functionality standpoint. They should be made on a business case for it. How reliable does it need to be? And then best and most important is it going to give you any kind of return on investment? We all kind of have that pretty fancy red or green or orange or whatever sitting around, but if it's not making you any money, it ain't doing you any good. And that's why a lot of farms end up struggling. They got you go to a lot of auctions, and back to that again, but a lot of auctions, and you see a lot of nice equipment, and you go, what happened? Well, that's what happened. A lot of nice equipment. Nothing wrong with buying it, but when you buy it excess, and a bank always seems to have that money. And then with a lot of the government programs, you got to aware that's there's nothing free in the world. There's these great programs. I mean, as a young farmer, you just got almost endless amount of money you can spend, and then you don't cash flow, and then eventually you're stuck with this huge debt, and the old equipment is gone, or animals are gone, or buildings are gone. So a good strategy is important. I know, like an old timer here, I'm telling you to do that, but it's very critical. And I see a lot of homesteaders, people starting out wanting to run a small scale farm, and the first thing they do is they have nicer stuff than I have. I know how to do this. I've been at it a long time, got a few dollars put away, and know how to do this and make some money at it. I recognize that a lot of people just get into it, they burn up that wad of money, and then they have no operating capital. If you don't have any operating capital, you're pretty much, might as well call the auctioneer. You're on the other end of this. So, that was kind of a dire statement there. So, and then I'm going to do one of these in the near future here, again on the homesteading, but I want to zero in on the equipment itself and what is needed, showing what we have utilized over the years. Not necessarily that particular brand, but more so what's worked, what hasn't worked, and hopefully give you some good focus on your venture. So I thank you very much and have a most wonderful evening.